Welcome to Smart Sex, Smart Love. We're talking about sex goes beyond the taboo, and talking about love goes beyond the honeymoon. My guest today is Zachary Zane, a Brooklyn-based columnist, sex expert, and activist whose work focuses on sexuality, culture, and the LGBTQ community. He's the author of Boyslut, a Memoir and Manifesto, and co-author of Men's Health Best Sex Ever. He writes Sexplain It, the sex and relationship advice column at Men's Health, and Navigating Non-Monogamy, the polyamorous relationship column in Cosmopolitan. He is editor-in-chief of Boyslut Zane, which publishes nonfiction erotica from kinksters across the globe. Zachary's work has been featured in New York Times, Rolling Stone, Washington Post, Playboy, and more. Today we're going to talk with Boyslut Zachary Zane, as he calls himself. I love it. About bisexuality, open relationships, gay hookup apps, and of course, his book, Boyslut, a Memoir and Manifesto. Welcome, Zachary.
Thank you so much for having me on, Joe. I'm excited to delve into it here.
Yeah, me too, really. And I've been watching you and watching all the stuff on Instagram and everything. And I have to say, I love your work, and I still love your work. But even though I've been so open and so my own kink and my own stuff, I watch you, and sometimes I'm like cringing. I'm like, why am I cringing? Like, this is like, you go to places, I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. I never thought, I don't know what it is.
I mean, I write very explicitly. I write very graphically, and I think that's on purpose too. You know, it's not just for shock value. I think it's important to be able to talk about sex and to have like candid and explicit conversations about it. And I've noticed specifically often like with bisexual activism, we kind of purposely like leave out the sex aspect of it because we want to make ourselves like more palatable to gay and straight audiences, the same way older generations of gays did that too, where like there was like a movement to kind of remove sex from it. I'm like, no, sex and raunchy sex is a large part of my sexuality. So it's important that when discussing bisexuality to be graphic, to be explicit. And if that makes some people uncomfortable, good. You should be unpacking that. Why does my sex life make you feel uncomfortable?
Yeah. No, I love it. And you just explained, because I'm of that generation, that we were trying to take sex out of it so we could be more accepted. But
yeah,
that's not the case anymore. And you're not doing that. That makes sense to me. And that's why I have a cringe response, because it goes against what I was doing before.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, let's just get right started into why you decided to write your book, Boyslut, a Memoir and Manifesto.
Sure. I mean, there are a few reasons why here, but I think the first one is I just really hadn't seen like a memoir written by a bisexual man about how to overcome sexual shame. And, you know, there are a lot of gay memoirs, and I just hadn't seen my story and experience really represented. You know, there was very, very little bisexual visibility up until more recently. And now we're starting to see it everywhere, and I'm a part of that, and I love it, and I live for it. But one thing I realized when I started, you know, writing about sex and relationships almost a decade ago, was that my experience as a bisexual man was actually not unique. But I felt so alone, so isolated. I didn't think bisexuality was real because every bi guy I knew in college came out as gay shortly after. So while I am egocentric, I'm not delusional. I was like, I can't be the only bi guy in the world here. But of course, there are bi guys absolutely everywhere. And once I came out as bi and started talking about it, I realized, oh my God, there are bi guys everywhere, but there's such a heavy negative connotation with the label itself, so they don't identify as it, or, you know, they're closeted, whatever it is. So I realized it was a voice that was really represented, or excuse me, a voice that was not represented and really needed. And so I wrote this book. And then another big aspect of this book, and one thing I bring up, is the fact that I didn't grow up in like a sex negative household. You know, like my parents were very sex positive. I had gay uncles. I have gay uncles on both sides of my family, my dad's side, my mom's side. I knew it was okay to be gay. And still, I had so much sexual shame. And that's just because, you know, even though I had, you know, great upbringing, great parents, I picked up sex negativity from my school, peers, media, teachers. You know, sex negativity is so pervasive and so insidious. And so for me, it was important to be like, hey, it's not just those people who got kicked out of their house for being gay who can write this book. Like, and that's why they have their trauma. Like, you can have a pretty good upbringing and still have so much sexual shame and so much sex negativity. It's like unless you live in like a polyamorous nudist commune without social media in the middle of nowhere, okay, maybe those guys don't have sexual shame, but the rest of us who live in society, we do. And of course, this book is kind of my journey about how I was able to really overcome that sexual shame.
I really appreciate you saying that, because a lot of people wonder, why do I have it if I have gay uncles or gay parents or whatever? And it's insidious. That was a great word.
Yeah.
What would you say was the hardest part about writing your book?
Ooh, I think for me, it's reliving kind of all the people I've hurt in the past. Before I was out as bisexual, before I knew how to communicate my desires, at a time when I thought that ghosting was the right thing that you should be doing, right? Because instead of I'm like, why have an awkward conversation saying you don't like someone? That's just going to hurt their feelings. Let me just not respond to them. That's the more mature response. I'm actually saving them hurt and pain. But I think reflecting on all the people I hurt, again, it was not maliciously. I was young. I was closeted. I was doing the best I could with the information that I had. And I was also deeply insecure and deeply ashamed. But I think reliving those moments was like, that sucks. And I think I was vulnerable in a way that I think people are somewhat confused by, because I am so open sexually. And I can talk about getting DP'd and my hairy butthole and sucking dick and gagging on it until the cows come home, and I love it. And that doesn't make me nervous or ashamed. But if you'll notice on my social media or my zine, I don't talk about my relationships with my parents. I don't talk about my bad breakups. I don't talk about these other elements where I'm vulnerable. And so, but people assume that just because I'm sexually open, I'm open in every other aspect of my life. And that's actually not necessarily the case. So I was a lot more vulnerable about, my family, my past relationships, my breakups, and other things that I had done. And that was really challenging. And there were definitely parts where my editor is like, dig deeper, be more honest with yourself, like lay it all out on the page. And I was like, oh, Jesus, this is scary.
And it's so interesting to watch you do it at such a young age. Usually people do their memoirs like later, like at my age,
It's, oh my God. I'm in the assisted living home with my dad, and his friends are 70s, 80s, 90s. And he said, oh, my son has a memoir. And they look at me and they're like, this fucking little kid has a memoir? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to curse, but I just did. But it's like, this little schmuck, like he's 30 years old. Or at the time I was 30. I'm 32 now. Okay. But it really is a collection of essays. You know what I mean? And I think the reason why we kind of settled on memoir is just because they tend to sell better. But if you look at it as a collection of essays, that kind of makes more sense. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's a memoir too, but it is that as well. But yeah, it's like, I can't write a memoir every year. Maybe 10 years from now, I'll write man slut. And then 10 years after that, I'll write daddy slut. And that will be the everything I've learned in every decade. I get to write a new memoir. That's
great. I like it. You said DP'd, and I don't think everyone's going to know what DP'd means.
So that's double penetration. In the case of my anatomy, that's two penises in my butthole.
Okay. So I don't want to know what that means. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right. You have a chapter in the book about the impact of Grindr. Let's talk about that. And before you do, I just want to say, plug my own little thing, that last year, I woke up and Grindr had adopted the term side that I coined, and they put it in as a sexual preference for top, bottom, verse, and side. Did you know that?
Yes, because I'm on Grindr, and so I see it. So I see it, and I am, and side is not a small demographic. No. I don't know what your data, like if there is like data on it, but it's it is quite, it's more than 1 in 50. You know what I mean? It's more than 2%. I'd really say it's 1 in 20. It's like 5%. And again, this is not backed scientifically, but just anecdotally. And from what I see, it really is not a small demographic. And it's so great that people have this word to describe it, and to know that, like, it's not necessarily that like they have internalized homophobia or anything like that, but it's just like, okay, like there's so much more to sex than penetration, and being able to explore that and not have shame for it and have a label for it is really important. But I've seen it adopted everywhere. I think like pretty much all hookup apps now have it. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, they do. And I know that a lot of people, I have a group for sides, 7,200 men are in there on Facebook. It's called Side Guys. And they're very, very upset about how they get treated on Grindr. And I hear them, But, because there's tops and bottoms, and then people don't like size, they're judgmental. I've been on Grindr myself. I'm married. I'm 30 years married. We have an open marriage. I just use it to play, and I don't have a problem with it. Like, if somebody's mean or they block me, I don't like it, but I like get over it. But you talked about it, can you talk about it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's because I think you're a little bit older, you're a little bit more mature, you're a little bit secure in yourself, but when you are like a 25-year-old or 30 and you just are getting rejected in this way, it can feel, it's easy to sometimes dismiss one or two people, but like if you're on Grindr a lot, it's like the rejections just get so brutal, like so unnecessarily nasty and mean. In a way, it really is exposed like kind of the racism, the femphobia, the fat phobia, the transphobia, like any opportunity to other and treat people like shit gay men will do.
Yeah.
And gay, queer, bi men will do. And it's just like you would think for a population that's been ridiculed and teased that we would be kinder to other people. But it's kind of that cliche or that phrase that like hurt people hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's very much that, and these people, it's very Velvet Rage, like type dynamic. You know what I mean? Where it's just like these people. I know the people who are mean and nasty, like, are not happy with themselves. You know what I mean? It's not like they live like happy lives. Like, and I do want to extend them some, sympathy, condolences, whatever the word is. But at the same time, like, you cannot be interested in someone and not be a dick to them.
Yeah.
And it's just a shame how that dynamic is. And I think just over time, it can really make you feel, especially if you're not feeling desired, like, oh, no one's going to like me because of my body size. No one's going to like me because I'm black. No one's going to like me because I'm HIV positive. And you internalize it. And you're like, I'm never going to find love. I can't even find casual sex. And so for some men, it can be really detrimental to their mental health.
It does make sense. And you're probably right about me being older, except that as an older guy, I do take it personally. It's hard not to. When you're around gay men in real life, like to me, Grindr's a playground. It's not really a serious place to me. But I had hoped. I mean, when I was your age, I started doing the advocacy work for gay men. And I had hoped by the time I was 60 that things would be better. And I think they're worse. I think we're meaner to each other than we were when I was young.
That's so sad. And, I can't necessarily speak to that because I don't know exactly what it was like 30 years ago. But like, I don't know if it's just because of social media. Like a part of me is just like that. And people feel very emboldened and empowered from the safety of their own toilet saying terrible things about people. And then that kind of extends into real life. And maybe it was the fact that we had more like physical community spaces, and that was the way we were actually meeting people. So if you were going to be cunty and mean, you had to say it to my fucking face. And were you really going to do that? God, like it is sad. Parts of it are sad. And one thing like I've noticed, and this is something I've seen, and again, I'm largely stereotyping. Obviously, this is not all gay men, and of course, there are gay men who have a healthy relationship with their identity, who treat people with respect, who are kind, have a great relationship with sex. Like, I don't want to make it like I don't want to perpetuate any stereotypes. But what was interesting about moving to New York is you had a lot of gay guys who got like from Bumblefuck, Idaho or whatever, got kicked out of their family for being gay, had a really traumatic upbringing, and really a lot of homophobia from the church, from their family, from their community. And they moved to New York, but they haven't actually worked on themselves. Mm-hmm. So they haven't actually put in the work to deal with their trauma. So they're still, yes, you're in a place where there's significantly less homophobia. There are gay spaces, gay scenes, but still they are insecure. Still they respond very poorly to rejection because they've been rejected their whole life. So if they get rejected sexually, they can lash out and be angry because it reminds them of their parents who rejected them in a different field. And it's like moving to New York is just not enough. You still have to work on yourself. You still have to get into therapy. You still have to look at the root of your problem. Otherwise, you're going to be passive aggressive or just blatantly aggressive to your friends in a way. And that's not what chosen family is about. That's not what community is all about. So, of course, I'm always encouraging everyone to get into therapy all the time to work on these issues. But I just noticed that. And again, I noticed this among, the 18 to 25-year-old demographic, right? And I think over time, as they get older and they mature and they have a sense of themselves, they can become less mean and more secure in who they are. But yeah, it was really frustrating when I moved to New York and I was trying to make gay friends. I'm like, you guys are mean. Like this isn't fun. I'm not enjoying this.
It's so weird. I'm so glad listening to you. It sounds like me when I wrote my book, I was 40. 10 Smart Things Gay Men Can Do to Improve Their Lives. And then I did my own book tour. And I had the exact same experience. People back then didn't know what internalized homophobia was, where a lot of guys know that now from social media. But they hadn't. I was like, why is my book? I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I wasn't some cosmopolitan guy. But I spoke about gay issues, and it was popular. Like, bookstores were back then, right? So my books were in the windows and everything. And people said, just because we've moved to New York or San Francisco or wherever, Chicago, doesn't mean that we came healed. We brought our unfinished business, and we didn't, just like you just said.
Yeah.
With older guys too. And I mean, I was 40 at the time, but now what you're saying, which may sound, we're just anecdotally talking. If it's the younger guys, still horrible, but at least it's more of the younger guy and not all gay.
Yeah. And I think we do have, it's definitely not all gay men. And, and I have managed to find my chosen family, my people, and I have gay friends, queer friends, bi friends, trans friends. It's a very queer community of people who are supportive and loving, and it's, now that I found it, it's absolutely incredible. But it just took me a little bit of time to get there and to find these people who have been working on their trauma and their issues and are aware that, like, oh, this is my baggage that I need to unpack, and let me not project it and put it on other people.
We don't have gay grandpas. We don't have gay elders. It
really is so sad, and I think about that a lot, and how lucky I am that I have gay uncles who lived in Provincetown. They just moved now to Western Mass, but I was able to go to Provincetown during the summers, sleep on an air mattress, and get to explore my sexuality, but also have these older gay uncles to talk to. And of course, because of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, we've lost so many men. Also, just because we weren't allowed to get married the same way, to see a couple that's still in a relationship for 30 years, because so many gay men didn't aspire to marriage because marriage wasn't feasible. We couldn't have it. So I was very lucky and feel so blessed to have had these kind of gay elders and these gay mentors that I can talk to about this. But I know so many younger gay men don't. But I think we're getting there. And, I hope, 10, 15 years from now or whatever age that I will get to be that queer, mentor for the younger gay and bi men.
Now, you coined the phrase bisexual audibility in your book. Can you tell me what it means and why it's so important?
Oh, absolutely. So I talk about visibility in the book and a little bit of my frustration with that word. I feel like often visibility is hailed as a panacea, where it's just oh, we just need more visibility and that will solve all social inequity and all racial issues and all gender issues and all sexuality issues. And for me, visibility is just the first step. It is the bare minimum. Mm-hmm. It is showing that we are real, we exist, and we want some goddamn respect as a marginalized group. And it's also for that marginalized group to recognize that they are not alone, right? There are other people like them. But I specifically talk about bisexual visibility being a little bit more challenging, because unless if you have a man on your right arm, a woman on your left arm, and a non-binary person on your third arm, and you're all making out simultaneously, you can't be bisexually visible. And while that sounds like an ideal quad for me, I know that's probably not what most bisexual people are looking for. But, when you're a guy in a relationship with a guy, you're perceived as gay. A guy in a relationship with a woman, you're perceived as straight. So because visibility is very different for bisexual people, what we need to do is actually have bisexual audibility, which I coined, which just means being as loud and obnoxious as humanly possible talking about bisexuality. Mm-hmm. Because you can't tell we're bi by looking at us. That means we have to say it. We have to claim the label. We actually have to use it. And it's just so important because right now, bi people are significantly less likely to be out to their family, their friends, their partners than gay and lesbians. And, we know all of the negative mental health outcomes and physical health outcomes that actually come from being closeted and feeling like you don't have a community. So the way for bisexual people to have a community, to feel accepted, to feel embraced, is to talk about it and to start coming out. And so I really encourage people to use the word if they feel it's right for them.
Yeah, no, I love it. Now, one thing I do want to ask you, because you sent me a packet, I got your book, and I got that dildo, right?
Yes.
So, and it's the colors of the bisexual flag, right?
Yes. So I have a limited edition dildo with Fun Factory called the Bi Amor, and it comes with it is it's in the colors of the bisexual flag. It is sadly it is not a mold of my penis. I really asked them to do that, and apparently that cost more money and was a pain in the ass. But this is a very fun dildo for everyone, all genders, all bodies here.
I have it at home, but I posted about it, and people were like, "What makes it a bisexual dildo?" So can you tell us?
It's just because of the colors, right?
Right.
No, like it's not actually. No, I mean everyone has a butthole. You know what I mean? That's regardless of sexual orientation, gender, whatever. So anyone can put in their butthole, but that's why it's just because of the colors. So yeah.
All right, I didn't want to answer that. I said I think it's just the colors, but I'll ask him when I do a podcast.
Yes.
All right. Sorry. The next one is in your book. You do talk a lot about bisexual visibility and sexual autonomy. Can you share a little bit about those two subjects?
Sure. So I spoke a little bit about bisexual visibility, but in terms of like sexual autonomy, I have a chapter about I'm on PrEP, and how I don't use condoms with a lot of men, right? And especially if you are in New York City and you're on Grinders or Grindr, Sniffies, or Scruff, like the vast majority of queer men are not using condoms. And I talk about how we all have a different level of risk when it comes to STIs, right? Some people are much more STI averse. Mm-hmm. And that way getting, an STI, they really do not want to get an STI. Some people, it's not that big of a deal, especially, if they're on PrEP, they know they're not going to get HIV. The rest can be treated with antibiotics, or, if it's a viral infection, like, so many people have herpes anyway, but essentially it's like either it's manageable or we can treat it with antibiotics. And so I really think it's important for us to be allowed to choose what our level of risk is. But what's important when discussing this, and I compare it to, I kind of take from kink culture and I talk about RAC, which is risk-aware consensual kink. And so what kind of this philosophy is when you do kink, you are very aware of the risks and you do your best to mitigate it. So like if you are getting tied up, you have a pair of safety shears nearby just in case it cuts off circulation. You have a safety word when you have sex. If you're doing choke play where you can't speak, you have a safety action. So, but even though you have these things in place, you still are acknowledging a risk. There's still a risk that you're allowed to take. And so I kind of want to, sorry. And one thing that RAC is very contingent upon is having the correct information and education. Mm-hmm. Right? You can't make a decision unless if you have all the information available to you, which is why it's important to be honest. It's important to know how STIs affect your body, which STIs are treatable, which STIs, are actually protected when wearing condoms. You can still get syphilis or herpes because that's from skin to skin contact. You can still get oral and gonorrhea and oral chlamydia if you don't wear a condom. And so like, really what I'm advocating for is being allowed to, you should be able to have all the information you have, and then you can make the decision for how you want to engage in sex. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very important. And I think, and part of this chapter, I really spoke about STI shaming and how like, it's just so pervasive. And the fact that we say it's gross, that means people don't get tested. People lie when they have STIs. And it further causes more and more STIs. And even, the move away from calling them STDs to STIs, because, it's sexually transmitted diseases versus sexually transmitted infections. It's like gonorrhea is a bacterial infection. You don't call strep, which is a bacterial infection, a disease. Yeah, right, that's a way we stigmatize it. And also just the history of STIs, it's just so racist and homophobic. You know what I mean? Like, especially how we use like HIV to justify, and AIDS to justify homophobia, to justify racism. So yeah, I know I'm kind of rambling here, but really this chapter was about, making sure that you were informed and you were educated, you were being honest and being able to decide the level of risk that you want to take with, of course, the consent of your partners.
I think it's important you're sharing this because people, when they see Memoir, they're not sure they're going to learn about your life, but are they going to learn about information too, and facts? And you do put that in there. So it's great.
Yeah, but I got a lot of hatred for this. I think especially it was from people, not queer men, because queer men, aren't wearing condoms the same way. So I think some like straight people were very surprised to learn, the lack of condom usage in metropolitan cities that have Grindr and whatnot.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not advocating for you to not wear
I
condoms.
know.
That's of course that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I want you to be educated about the risks. And if you make this informed decision yourself with the consent of your partner, that's a decision that you're allowed to make. But people were just like, oh my God, Zach's cavalier anti-condom use. And I'm like, I have more conversations about my sexual health and my condom use with my partners than fucking anyone, than people who are wearing condoms. Because I want to make sure people are aware of the risk. I make sure people know that I am high risk, like if this is something that you are very STI averse, then we should definitely be wearing condoms or potentially not having sex at all. But it was just, it was very surprising, maybe not surprising, but just like the level of animosity where I'm like, if you want, of course you should wear condoms. That is your choice. I'm advocating for choice here.
I know it's a culture now where you say something and, you're dangerous because you said it or you didn't say it right or you didn't. I don't know, but I want to ask you something, and since you're on here, so I'm monosexual, right? I'm a gay man, right?
Yeah.
I'm bisexual. I'm a little bit fluid as I've gotten older. I don't know how fluid I really am, but I'm more fluid than I was. I was at a party one time, and the woman was wearing a zipper dress in the front, and I swear I was 50 years old 10 years ago, and I've never, ever had this thought. I thought the whole night of wanting to unzip that dress, and I don't even know what I would have done. I was aroused. I was all turned on. And it really freaked me out. I had to go back to a therapist I worked with for trauma work. And as a young guy, they thought I was gay because I was sexually abused by a woman. And so they thought, well, maybe that's why you're gay. And I'm like, is this coming out? Am I latent heterosexual? Am I going to have to leave Mike? And my books are all it was crazy. Anyway, I only bring all that up because I'm an educator. So I like to talk about all the LGBT. When I talk about bisexuals, you have no idea the kind of hate, the kind of horrible, a shitty, horrible, and could you put help me I mean, I kind of understand it, but maybe you could speak to it.
It really is like people really love to shit on us. And I think it's this idea that we're not genuinely a part of the community and that we can choose to be, like for me, I can choose to be with a woman and therefore have a much easier life. Like in their minds, it's like, okay, well, you can be with a woman. You're not going to be discriminated against. You don't have to worry about coming out. You don't have to worry about these things. So you don't understand our struggle. And because you don't understand our struggle, you're not part of the LGBT community. Fuck you. I hate you.
Yeah.
And it's so sad to me that your experience with oppression and marginalization, discrimination is what validates your queer identity, where it's like should not be, like you're not more queer or gayer because you've been a victim of a hate crime. It's so sad. And of course, bisexual people, if you are in like a straight passing relationship, of course you need to check your privilege. I understand that when I walk down the street holding hands with a woman, I'm not afraid the way I am walking down the street holding hands with a man, which I do check over my shoulders. You know what I mean? To make sure nothing's going to happen.
Me too.
So like, I think it's this idea that, bisexual people have it easy. They don't understand our struggle. I think there's also some fear of sexual rejection where it's like, I'm dating a man, or especially like with lesbians, or lesbians and bi women in particular, where it's just like, they're going to leave me for a man. And lesbians are particularly mean to bi women in this setting. And so I think there's this fear of being left and being feared of having a straight life. And so I think that's a large part that contributes to kind of this bisexual hatred, although we're starting to see, I think, changes. I think we're also, because we're just starting to embrace a level of fluidity in sexuality. So even, I have gay friends who've been gay for 20, 30 years, identify as such, haven't had sex with a woman. They're in their 40s, 50s. And they're so excited to have sex with a woman. And I have these men coming out as bi to me. And they're like, when I was coming out 20 years ago, like bisexuality wasn't an option. You were gay or straight. Because I was more feminine and because I knew I loved men and I'm predominantly attracted to men, I said I was gay. And that's been my life. And now that I realize that bisexuality is an option, I actually want to engage with women in this way. And it's so interesting getting those questions from these older gay men who are kind of realizing it. But then also, I think there's this fear also with bisexuality that like kind of like Republicans and conservatives are going to use it against us, where they're like, and we've already seen that with fluidity too. Where they're like, oh, look, see, these gay guys can be straight after 20 years. It's like, no, that's not what we're advocating for. And fluidity doesn't mean we can force this, force being straight. And neither would I want to force being straight. I like being queer. I like dating men. So I think there's also some hesitation to almost acknowledge fluidity exists because it's going to end up being used against us, which is unfortunate.
What would be, we have to almost come to a close, what would be a final message that you would want listeners to hear about you, your book, anything?
Oh my God. Life is so much more fun and enjoyable if you can help reduce sexual shame. And I feel like there are kind of two tips I have for this, overarching tips, for this. And the first one is I always like to think when I'm experiencing shame of any type, like who or what is trying to control me? Because shame is a tool that people in position of power use to control the masses. You know what I mean? So like we slut shame women to uphold a patriarchy to keep them tethered to men. I sometimes feel guilty or shame when I don't work hard enough. And that's just kind of like if I'm not working 60, 80 hours a week, and that's just a brilliant tool of capitalism. You know what I mean? And they use shame to get me to keep working harder and harder and harder and never taking a break. So often when I think of who or what is trying to shame me and kind of making it this external entity, I'm able to realize that, oh, this is actually not coming from me or within. This is not my thought belief. This is someone else. I'm able to create that distance. That's really important for me. And then the second thing is the importance of finding a queer community and having that friend group, because I think shame really exists and thrives in isolation, right? When you are alone and you have no one to talk to and you can quickly have a negative spiral down about how you're a bad person or a disgusting person or a sick person, when you're able to actually talk to someone and get that support in this community to lean on, that has been one of the best ways for me to help overcome my sexual shame. So
love that.
I'll leave you with those tidbits of wisdom here. But yeah, Boyslut, a Memoir and Manifesto, is sold anywhere books are sold. You can buy it on Amazon. It is one word, because if it was 2 word, it would have caused trouble because it has slut in it. But because it's one word, it's a made up word. So that's why it is, even though it looks like it's 2 words on the book, like it actually has to be written as one word, because otherwise sex negativity, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, like I this book, it really is for all queer people, queer men, bi women, queer people, like alternative people. I talk a lot about polyamory in it. I talk a lot of kinks, wild kinks and crazy things in it. It is raunchy, it's explicit, and I really hope you guys pick up a copy. And where can they find you? Sure. So my website is zacharyzane.com, or I'm on Instagram at zacharyzane_. Those are probably the 2 best ways to contact me and stay in touch with my work. I love your Instagram. I'm telling you, that's where I was like, it's just fun. You're having fun. You're doing this. And then there's, and then, I'm just like all over the place, and I love it. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Joe. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on my podcast and for joining me today. On Smart Sex, Smart Love, and you can hear more of my podcast at smartsexsmartlove.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and by the way, I have 660,000 followers now, and it's growing. Wow. Instagram and Facebook, and you can go to drjoeport.com, or if you go to any of my social media, it's at Dr. Joe Port. Thanks for listening, and until next time.